So, this is the first episode of the series called Isolated. And to just recap what this is you're taking a piece of a story out of its context and seeing what you can take away from it. So, getting rid of the source material that happens before and after and just looking at this specific scene or section, you look at what we can take away from it. So the first thing we're doing, first episode of Isolated, is a show called Durarara. Yeah, like, the name's weird as fuck, I know. But the whole story is about this boy who goes to Tokyo. And he goes there to find more excitement in his life, because he feels like life doesn't really have a point. But this episode is actually the second episode. So what happens in this section is we get introduced to a girl named Rio, who has no relevance to the plot before or after this, but just for the sake of this one episode, she's given a lot of development. So the episode is titled Highly Unpredictable, and as you'll see with this story, nothing in this story is really predictable. It's hard to understand why things happen or why people do the things that they do, but specifically in this section, it gets even more unpredictable, or as unpredictable as it could possibly get. So the episode begins by a monologue with this girl named Rio, and she explains that there's many perspectives to life, and that the life that we live isn't necessarily the life, it's just one life in a life of many. She explains like things that seem mundane or redundant and boring to certain people only seem that way until something bad happens. And as soon as something like opens up or something breaks through this peaceful life or routine-based life that we have, things start to look different, or worse in some cases. Some people crave that excitement, but once that excitement comes to you, it's not always exactly what you think it is. So that's basically what she's monologuing about, because in her life, things changed drastically when a crack, quote-unquote, broke through her life and made things different. So Rio was basically born to a very typical family. There's nothing special about this family. She had a mom, a dad, and she was the only child. And because she never really had many friends, she was always like really close with her family. She was like being home because her family was like, in her head, all she really needed. But one day a letter appears in her mail which shows her father cheating. And it's a picture that shows the dad with another woman, and then under it says, "Are you gonna let them get away with it?" This is an example of those unpredictable things that happen in people's routine life that throws everything off balance. So she's confused and hurt by like what she saw, of course, but she decides not to do anything about it. She goes through her normal life as it always was, pretending like she never really heard or saw what she saw. But to kind of like deal with it, she posts in an online blog about like how her feelings are and like how hurt she really is. She makes a post one day saying that everything is a pain and that she just wants to disappear. She gets an inbox by a boy named Nakura, and this boy is messaging her to comfort her, to see like what's going on in her life. And this is online, so no one really knows what anyone looks like. She explains to him like what happened and how her father had cheated on her mom, and that she doesn't really know what to do. But like I said, she doesn't do anything. She chooses not to do anything. And as a result, her routine life schedule of going to school, being alone, coming home to her family, eating dinner, her dad making the same stupid ass jokes, kind of like gets thrown off balance. She starts to think that like her dad's jokes aren't even that funny, and that the food that they eat at night isn't even that good. Things start to become more, I guess, depraved to say the least for this girl. 6 months later, she decides like she's had it. She can't take it anymore. So she takes the letter, puts it in the mail, and the mom finds the mail. Now she thinks something's gonna come from this, but later that night, they act like nothing happened. The mom's still laughing at the dad's dumb jokes, and they're both just like completely the same. It's almost like she never really got the letter, but she did. And the daughter, Rio, is thinking just that nothing really matters, because if something like that couldn't change this, then she thinks that maybe if she disappeared, nothing would really change. Now, this is where the story starts to get really weird, but trust me, it all makes sense in the end. The boy she's messaging online, named Nakura, messages her and explains like that the two of them aren't so different. They've gone through the same thing. And when she asks, "What do you mean?" he explains And I know how stupid this is gonna sound. He explains that his girl that he dated for his whole life banged his dad.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I know how stupid that sounds. Trust me, it makes sense in the end. You ever know the meme where it's like, when your girl's like, can you pass the salt, daddy? And like your dad or her dad. Cut that up. If there's anyone out there who's had their girl banged by their dad, I'm sorry for you. I hope you get through it. But anyway, he goes on to explain like what the real problem was, and the problem wasn't even that the dad banged the girl, it's that his mom basically didn't care at all, and she was more worried about how she would look like, or her family would look like, if she said something to other people. So Nakura, the boy, explains that he hates his mom the most because the mom kept it a secret and didn't really care, and she was more worried about saving face than she was about like what actually happened. Echoing the girl's feelings, Rio, she tells him that it's not that she cared about you or her family, she just doesn't care about anything. She's heartless and all this other stuff, which is her projecting her own perspective of what her family was like. And as a result, things kind of keep going, and one day Nakura tells the girl, do you want to disappear together? Things keep going, and then one day Nakura just tells her, Rio, do you want to disappear together? And this is coined from her first post where she says there's just too much pain and she just wants to disappear. In her head, she feels like Nakura is kind of messing with her, but she decides to go through with it anyway because she feels like she doesn't really have much else to lose. So even though she knew she was being deceived, she goes through with it. Or she thinks she's being deceived, she goes through with it. And on her first day there in Tokyo, which is where she goes to disappear, she gets kidnapped by someone who pretended to be Nakura. She gets kidnapped and she gets put, like that chloroform mask thing or whatever gets put over her, and she passes out. And as she passes out, the last thing she thinks of is that this is what she deserved. No one knew where she was, so she's just gonna disappear from everyone's life, and no one will even know that she's gone. That's what she thinks as she disappears, but somehow, some way, someone else had seen this girl get kidnapped. Person who saw this person get kidnapped calls a hitman that's like really well known in Tokyo to go and save this girl. And after a lot of stuff, this girl gets saved. When she gets saved, the hitman asks, are you okay? Rio nods, and then the hitman says, I've been asked to like escort you to a specific place, so I'm gonna take you there. And so on this motorcycle, they go through the city. And on the way there, she just keeps thinking that nothing feels real anymore. But the only thing that feels real is the warmth being emitted from this body in front of her, the person who she's holding on to as they're driving. And as she's like wondering about the warmth of this person, she wonders to herself, what is this person thinking? What do they know? What goes on in this person's life? She's just being very introspective about what goes on in this body in front of her. How does Rio look in front of her? That's what she wonders. How does she look to this person? Have they been through a specific pain, etc., etc., etc. Eventually she gets dropped off at this rooftop, and on the rooftop she meets the real Nakura, the real person she's been messaging online. And it turns out that the person that she's been messaging online was the one that actually had saved her, had called this hitman to come and get her. She's really thankful, but then she wonders to herself, how did this guy know that she got kidnapped? And then he explains that the reason why she got kidnapped was because he set it up. He set up her getting kidnapped, and he set up her getting saved to prove a point to her. He explains that though she wanted to disappear, she was relieved when she was saved, which are contradictory things. It's like, you know, it's like those people that want to be alone, but then once someone comes in their life, or someone like tells them to like hang out or whatever, they're happy. But it's very contradictory because you wanted to be alone, but you're still, you know, it's almost like an oxymoron. But in this case, the girl was happy to be saved, which he explains means that she didn't really want to die. Now, bear in mind, this Nakura guy is not necessarily a good person because he did all these things. He's kind of like in this story, he's kind of like the psychopath. But you don't really need to know that to like understand why this is so interesting. So this is where things get a bit twisted, because the guy tells her, Nakura tells her, that she thinks she's special because she's gone through something, but she's no different than anyone else. Everyone else in this city has gone through something, and they're standing in a place where people actually go to to disappear. And that just because she had those feelings, she's no different than every other human. She's just another person. And just like her parents, she's no different either, because she has her own secrets. She's basically not so different from her parents in the sense that she had a secret, she kept. Her parents had a secret, they kept. So what makes her any different than her parents? He has a quote where he explains that even though you get cheated on, or you cheat on someone, you still laugh at the same stupid jokes in reference to her father's bad jokes, and you still eat terrible food in reference to the cooking that their parents made. Despite all the things you go through, humans still do the same shit. They laugh at stupid jokes, they eat shitty food, and they sleep at night. It's the same routine for everyone. So going through something doesn't make you different or special. It just makes you human. This is where you realize that this guy's not really a good guy. Well, I mean, you kind of could have noticed throughout the whole thing. But specifically now, he walks away. But as he's walking away, he tells her that he knew she didn't want to die. And that she was just as boring as everyone else. And that he doesn't care about anything she goes through. Even though this whole time, she thought she had someone in this world that, cared for her. So he walks away and disappears. And she's still standing on the ledge of this building. She wonders if her jumping off right now would hurt him. Hurt Nakura, the guy that's been, helping her throughout this whole thing. And she decides to jump. She jumps, but before she hits the ground, she's saved by that hitman earlier. And the hitman saves her, and as the hitman's walking away, she asks, "Why did you do it?" And she responds with a very beautiful sentiment. She tells her that life isn't as bad as you think it is. Those are the exact words that this girl needed to hear in this specific moment. So as she walks away, she's walking away from the place where she just had the craziest day of her life, to say the least. And as she's walking away, she finds it in herself to forgive her parents. She's walking through the city alone, and she's wondering about, what her dad and mom were like. And all these other things she's thinking about as she's walking through the city all alone. And she decides to forgive them. Since that day, she says life started to seem more colorful than it used to be. And as her life goes on, she wonders if one day she would be able to tell someone the exact words that were told to her. That life isn't as bad as you think it is. And that's the whole story. J. Cole has a song called The Badness. And in the song, he says, "I seen a baby cry, then seconds later it laughed. So the beauty of life is that the pain never lasts." And that's exactly what this story is. That the pain we go through, or the things that throw our predictable lives into disarray, they aren't as bad as we think they are. And it feels like in the moment when we go through things that these things are everything, but this thing is exactly what it is, just a thing. And it's hard to understand that, especially in a moment, going through stuff, or feeling like these things that we go through are permanent. But there's no such thing as permanence besides permanent choices. Death being one of those permanent choices, or disappearing being one of those permanent choices. And a permanent choice to a temporary problem is not the right choice to go. And I understand every situation is different, but exactly what that lady said, the hitman said, the world isn't as bad as you think it is, and life isn't as bad as you think it is. And it's hard to understand that, but when you understand that, life just suddenly becomes that much better. So that's exactly how these isolated episodes are going to work. They're going to be just standalone stories or sections from stories where you can take it out of its context and still be okay with it. You didn't need to understand who the characters were before or after. You just needed to know what happens in this episode. Every Wednesday I'll be posting this. So hopefully if you like what you saw here, you stick around, because this will be every Wednesday and it'll be here for a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope any of you found anything out of this that you might, value. If any one of you guys had your girl or guy banged by your dad, I'm sorry. I hope you get through it, man. Whatever.